Hey Facebook, it's me and Kelly here at WAGS and Wiggles, and we are doing our Facebook Live event on pandemic puppies. So we're very, very glad to have you guys join us today. We're going to get started here in just a minute or so. We are just waiting for the live stream to come up and give some people some time to join us. If you are out there and seeing our live event, if you can give us a thumbs up so that we know you're there. Can you hear us? And actually, I think I can take my mask off now that we are socially distanced from each other, and you guys can hear me a little bit better. And does it look like our live feed is up? All right. So today we are talking about pandemic puppies, and quite a few of our clients and even us have gotten puppies during the time of the coronavirus. Having a dog, we have the time now, we're home, and we're able to have the time to work with the dog. So many families have gotten a dog. And are we looking okay, ladies? All right, you can see it on the laptop too? Okay, yes. Awesome. So, with all of these puppies that we've been getting during the coronavirus, and we haven't been able to take them out and socialize them, all of the puppy classes were closed for so long, and ours are back up and running now, but for months we had no opportunities to socialize our puppies. We couldn't get near other people or other dogs on walks. We didn't want to take dogs over to our neighbors' houses. And now a lot of these dogs are entering adolescence, and we're seeing quite a bit of fear. We're having a lot of people start training with us or coming in for daycare meet and greets, and we're just seeing how fearful these dogs are. So hopefully everybody can hear us and you're joining us for the live feed. Give us a thumbs up if you're out there and you can hear us, and that'll give us some feedback to keep going. So this is Kelly. She's our assistant training manager at Rancho, and we're going to start off our discussion today talking about Rocket here, who is the black and white shepherd mix. And Rocket came to us for a meet and greet, and Kelly's going to talk a little bit about that. And I had one more thing. Yes, at the end of our video, we're going to do a live demonstration. So hopefully you guys will stick around to the end. We're going to be here, we're going to be talking for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to do a live demonstration, so hopefully you guys will stick around for that. If you have a comment or a question, maybe about your pandemic puppy, go ahead and shoot us a question in the comment section, and once we're done talking about Rocket, we're going to answer all of your questions. So, Kelly, how did you first meet Rocket?
Rocket came to us in July. He had recently been adopted by a wonderful family. He was fitting in very well at home. However, they found quickly that he was very unsocialized and insecure around other dogs. When he would see them, he would get very defensive. His hackles would go up, he'd lunge, he'd bark, he'd growl, and it obviously troubled the owners. So they immediately reached out to us and wanted to set up a meet and greet, so they scheduled that through the office. And when they arrived, the office immediately came and asked me to come meet with them because he was hiding under the bench and very, very scared. And Dad was obviously interested in training. So that's how I met him, when he was under the bench, shaking and growling and barking at every dog coming by.
And how old is Rocket now?
He's close to a year, and he was about 10 months old when he found his new home.
And if I remember the story right, Rocket was found as a loose dog in Sacramento, and kind of a long story, but a bunch of rescues eventually got involved. It was during the time of coronavirus, so most rescues and shelters were not taking dogs. So it took a little bit of effort, but they finally found a rescue for him, and then that's where his family got him from.
Correct. Yes.
All right, so how did you know when you met Rocket and you saw the growling and the lunging and just how all of his hackles up and how fearful he was? How did you know that you were going to be able to help him? Because that sounds, you know, like behavior a lot of our clients might see. They may not see it till they take the dog for a walk and start getting closer to other dogs. or they may not see it until the dog is more in adolescence, like Rocket was. But how did you know you were going to be able to help him?
Well, we've been very lucky here at WAGS that a lot of people reach out to us to help with dogs like him, and we've seen it a lot this year because of all the pandemic puppies. We've been seeing a lot of puppies or young dogs come in who were just unsocialized, didn't have a lot of positive exposure because everyone was obviously at home for good reasons. And we've just had so much success with our protocol, with our positive reinforcement, with our counter conditioning, and once you see a pattern of it working over and over and over again, you just know it works. And I've even had it work with my own dog. I adopted a 6-year-old boxer 2 years ago, and she she was a hot mess when she came in. She had severe trust issues with people and dogs, and 2 years later, she's just a completely different dog, and everything I did with her is all the stuff we do with our clients' dogs. And so I know it works.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you brought up a really good subject, and that's counter conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that we teach in our classes and our private lessons. We work on it a lot. We even work on it in the daycare when we have dogs come in and you know, maybe they're worried about something in the daycare.
Mm-hmm.
We use it everywhere. So maybe you can explain a little bit about what counter conditioning is.
Counter conditioning at its core is basically helping change a dog's emotional response to a trigger being something that causes a negative emotion or a negative reaction to a dog. In the case of Rocket, every time he saw a dog, it elicited a reaction in him of getting really defensive, getting really fearful. So we take something that's really reinforcing. Yes, good boy. Take something that's really reinforcing, in his case, cheese. He is obsessed with cheese. And every time we're around dogs, he gets cheese. Every time a dog enters the environment, all of a sudden there's cheese in the equation. And so finally, those scary triggers start to become an environmental cue that something good is about to happen. So now we start to see a shift where instead of seeing, in his case again, a dog and getting really scared, he sees a dog and gets excited because something good is going to happen. So there's other elements that go into it, but at the core, that's what that is.
That's an awesome description. In the video, if you guys look down in the description of our live event, you will see that there is a blog post and a YouTube video about Rocket, and you'll see where he is being introduced to some dogs. How did you decide what dogs would be good to try and help Rocket?
Well, I wanted dogs who would give him his space, and I wanted dogs who would not be too interested in him and want to sniff him too much. Whenever we introduce a dog like him to another dog, we always use trainers' dogs or our own dogs, because we understand what our dogs are going to do. They're more predictable because we know how they're going to respond in certain situations. And in the case of a few of your dogs that we used, I knew that they would be more interested in the food and more interested in other things and not him. And when we introduced him, we had him behind an X-pen, and the dogs were on the other side, and that way he could sniff them and interact with them safely. And if he was acting appropriately, I let him continue, but if he started to get a little too stiff or he started going in a direction I didn't want him to go in, I was able to easily redirect him, and the other dogs were obviously safe, and he was safe from them as well in case they got grumpy with him as well.
And I think that brings a good point where we didn't actually start doing that until we actually had some behaviors that we could cue from Rocket.
Right.
If you start with a dog that doesn't have a communication system, that's what cues are. Cues to, you know, look somewhere else with your leave it command, or just be able to be still with a stay behavior. You want to have a communication system with a dog before you start trying to socialize them.
Right.
And I think that's the part a lot of people miss, that little piece, is they have a dog, they think they want to socialize it, so they go out looking for dogs, but the dog doesn't even know how to respond to its name out in public barely.
Right.
So you don't have any way to guide the dog through the experience, and that's really important. So I think Rocket was probably here for maybe 4 days or so before we even did any sort of exposures with him. So what changes did you start to see in Rocket that really were kind of exciting for you?
Well, he went fairly quickly from just immediately and impulsively barking and growling at dogs to looking more calmly, which gave me more time to redirect him and prevent an outburst from even happening in the first place. The first week he was still fighting that impulse, but by that second week he was a lot more calm. By the third week he was actually showing interest in the other dogs. He was actually, the dogs would come in and his tail would wag a little bit and he'd be sniffing the air with some healthy curiosity. And by the fourth week he was working side by side with a lot of dogs, which was really, really fun to see because for a while there we were working at a distance and we just saw that threshold slowly shorten.
And towards week 4, if you guys go to the blog post or the YouTube video, you'll actually see him playing with a couple other dogs. And that was towards the end of the program. So all of that hard work really paid off because he was able to actually interact with other dogs loose. And while that doesn't have to be the goal for every dog, not every dog is going to enjoy being off leash with other dogs because it can be scary for them. It's not controlled. The other dog may not even know how to play. So we were lucky that Rocket actually had a little bit of play behavior in there. And one of the specific things for Rocket is because he was found as a loose dog, that means that he lived on the streets for some unknown period of time. And when a dog lives on the streets, they can be extremely defensive about other dogs because there's other loose dogs who are like gangs of dogs protecting their territory. There's shared resources where all these loose dogs are trying to find food, so there's a lot of conflict. And so if a dog is found on the streets, even if it's for a day or two, it can really change their opinion of other dogs. And so street dogs need oftentimes a lot of support in order to become comfortable with other dogs again. So Rocket was actually in our puppy raising program. And we do have a couple programs that we work with these behavior cases, and that's puppy raising and board and train. The basic difference between the two is in puppy raising, they get to go home at night and be with their family, and the board and train, they're actually here day and night for a period of time. So maybe you can talk about what's included in the puppy raising program that Rocket went through.
The puppy raising program is a 4-week program where the dogs can come in either 3 times a week or 5 times a week. And like Laurie said, the dogs are dropped off in the morning, picked up at night. So the dogs get the benefits of socialization, whether they're in the daycare or not. And they also get an hour of training each day, one-on-one with the trainer, working on various obedience stuff, working on counter conditioning, getting them out in the real world. We do encourage owners to come do lessons with us weekly. So in the case of Rocket, his owner was awesome and came every week and did a lesson with me so I could show him everything we worked on that week, as well as discuss goals for the following week. And he would tell me what he would like me to kind of pinpoint on and really narrow in on. And what's really cool with the puppy raising program is you also get 2 months access to our online classroom, which is something you can use at your own convenience at home. There's a lot of great information, a lot of great videos on there. So if you're at home and you're kind of stuck and maybe we're close, you have a lot of information available to you on the classroom.
And some of the things that we went over with Rocket's parents were they had to learn a lot about leash handling. Because how you handle your dog on the leash will definitely affect their behavior. So we can train certain behaviors for the dog to respond to cues, but ultimately the owner also has to learn how to handle the dog, to keep them calm in situations, how to deliver the reward, maybe body blocks so that they can make the dog feel protected if another dog is approaching. So I saw some of those lessons that you went through with them, and so there's a lot of human coaching that has to go into it too. So what we wanted to show you guys here, hopefully everybody is still watching and with us. Give us a thumbs up or a heart if you are still watching our video. We are going to go into our live demonstration now. And we were really kind of trying to discuss what we wanted to show you as far as a live demonstration. We thought about doing some behaviors, and Kelly's actually doing one of them right now, which is a nose target to the fingers. And a lot of people may say, why does it matter if my dog touches their nose to my fingers? How is that gonna solve the problem of my dog being aggressive? Well, one of the things it does is it teaches the dog an orientation behavior. And an orientation behavior is a way to get the dog to focus on the handler. Because if something is in the environment that your dog's gonna worry about, we start with that counter conditioning process to make them worry less. But then ultimately, we want them to focus on us and just ignore it. So the hand touch behavior is a way to orient the dog back to the handler. We also use it to get them into heel position, and it works as a great recall also. The other behavior we work on is leave it. So maybe you can show them how we start that. So the first thing we do is we want the dog to ignore a simple distraction and give us eye contact. So we start with food in the hand, and we want the dog to completely ignore the food. You see he's not even trying to get to the hand. Most people, if they have food in their hand, the dog will be like all over their hand and chomping it and biting it, and they don't have any self-control.
He bows off in a shake.
So this is a very simple beginning of the behavior leave it that we work on. Eventually we start working on much harder things like, can you leave rabbit poop on the ground? Can you stop looking at that dog that is across the street? So that's very important leave it cue. The other thing that we talked about doing as far as the live demonstration is actually seeing if Rocket would have any interaction with Fancy. This is Fancy, she's a Sheltie, and he's not met her before. And the interesting thing is when we were getting set up for our live demonstration here and we brought Fancy into the room, Rocket was already stationed on his climb, and he showed us some concerns. He didn't know why Fancy was coming in here. There was a bunch of people in here. So we were trying to determine if we were gonna kind of follow through with that. And I think we'll do it in a very, very controlled manner. So just because Rocket's gone through this process and he was able to play with a few other dogs, that does not mean, nor do we expect him to then be okay in every situation with every dog he meets. And I think that's a great reminder for people. And it also doesn't mean there's a setback. So if you are working with your dog and you're working towards a goal and something doesn't go quite according to plan, it doesn't mean that it didn't work. It's just part of the process. And training is not an event, it is a process. And training is something you do with your dog, not something you do to your dog. So there's always going to be hills and valleys, just like if you're learning something. So I thought maybe what we would try is, I'm gonna have you release Rocket off the climb that direction. We're gonna move the climb out of the way. And then I'm gonna have you allow him to come towards Fancy's rear end and see if he has any interest in even sniffing her. That's kind of the first little test you can do to see if a dog is even interested in meeting the other dog. Now, there's a big warning signal here that I want to give people is when you're introducing your dog to another dog, never ever go head to head. So you can see Fancy's turned away, he's turned away. We don't want them sniffing each other's faces. That's actually not a polite greeting. If you've ever been to dog park, most of you guys have seen a dog kind of go to the rear end of another dog. They might actually start circling each other and sniffing each other. And then they'll go off and have some interaction. That's a more polite greeting in the doggy world. So kind of sniffing face to face would be like two humans who didn't know each other come running up and like hugging each other, and like that's just too personal. You would want to maybe shake hands or keep a little distance from each other, especially nowadays. So that would be a much more polite greeting. So let's go ahead and hop him off the climb.
Okay. Rocket, touch. Yes, good boy.
And Renee's gonna come in here and grab our climb for us. Now, one other important aspect of this is I'm gonna reward the dog that we're asking to sit politely. And at first I just want Fancy to ignore him. And so I know that she's going to do that. So that was actually really good. Now, I don't know if you guys saw that little tiny body language change, but when he looked over at Fancy, his tail went up in the air. It happened real fast, but all of us trainers are used to watching for it. So that was a go away signal on his end. He was saying, tail goes up, I don't know about you, I'm not so sure about this situation. So we need to read that, and he has a mat behavior, which we're gonna reward here.
Down.
He doesn't have to lay down, he doesn't want to. So what we're gonna do again is you can go ahead and walk him away and come back and see again, does that tail go up in the air again when he looks at Fancy? So you can see here right now he's more focused on Kelly. So he's actually in avoidance right now. That was nice.
That was nice. Good
So he
boy.
looked over at Fancy, and that time the tail didn't go up. He just relaxed himself and laid down. So that's a first great start to these dogs being able to meet each other in a very controlled fashion, is him just being able to look over here at Fancy, and for us to be able to gauge what his emotional state is. And body language is the only way you're going to be able to tell how your dog is feeling. They don't speak English, we don't speak dog, we are completely foreign to each other in our language. So our only mode of communication is through the body language. And if a dog is in avoidance, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is an indication that I'm not going to just let Fancy then go up to him, because he's already said I'm not sure.
Right.
So let's try it again and see if his opinions change. And if he does want to approach Fancy's rear end, he can.
Cool. Great.
So he's still not showing a lot of interest. Now, one of the things we can determine here is if we take away the mat's a huge target for him. So you can move it off to the side so we have somewhere to help him calm down if he needs it. That's another great thing we use with the mat. Come on back. Is we use the mat to reset the dog. Nice.
Good boy.
So you see there, he
Good
took a look
boy.
at Fancy, and he took a look and then looked at Kelly like, I'm not so sure what to do in this situation, so I'm just gonna check in with you. So, perfectly fine. Today is not the day that these two dogs are gonna go romping around this room, and there is nothing wrong with that. And ultimately, what you want from your reactive dog is you want a communication system. You want to be able to read how they're feeling. You want them to be able to communicate back to you how they're feeling. And ultimately, if all that happens with your dog is they can walk down the street past other dogs and not react, I mean, that's my goal for my dogs. I just want them not to react. I don't need my dog to be, a lot of times what happens with puppies too, when owners start to socialize them, is they say, okay, we gotta go nose to nose, and I gotta drag them up to every dog that I see, and the puppy may not be ready for that, or what they learn is, I pull and I'm pushy, and then I get what I want, and then later on that becomes reactive behavior. So you also don't want the flip side. You don't want the dog who is flailing and, jumping up in the air and vocalizing out of excitement when they see another dog, because the other dog is going to look at your puppy with a little bit of suspicion, and then we have a little feedback loop going of, I'm not so sure about you, and then the puppy might get scared. So you really want everything to be calm before dogs are introduced with each other. So thank you, Kelly, for joining us today. I'm super proud of Rocket.
Me too.
And thank you, Fancy, for being here. She's been so calm and lovely. And we're going to be doing more Facebook Live events. I think we decided our next one is going to be on teaching your dogs tricks and perhaps getting your tricks title. So look for that in the coming weeks. And thank you guys for joining us. Did we have any comments today?
Kim Connolly said that it sounds like Java these days. So Kim, we would love to work with you and your dog. And Joni Lamb said, good job, Rocket.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we hope you will watch us on our future live events. And thank you.
Thank you.